This encounter took place when I was 14, and I had made friends with a fellow gun nut in school. He invited me over to his house to show me his parents' collection of rifles. Eventually, I would have him over to see my own dad's collection, but I think they were having much more firepower than my family was. It was when we were driving by a rather bare patch of land, I spotted a very attractive girl. She stopped me in mid-sentence, and even though we were cruising, she looked right back at me. I didn't say anything since we were with my friend's parents. I didn't want them to think that I'd turned their son girl crazy. We'd reached their home that sat at the edge of town, and it had a clear view of the Arizona rurals. Then, we started looking through his parents' guns, and I began looking around the room. Hanging on the wall was the picture of the girl that I had saw while we were in the car. It was unmistakable. The exact girl. The eyes, mouth, hair, especially the eyes, were all the same. I almost yelped. If she was family, I was hoping that I would have the chance to meet her. I kept quiet until I could talk to my friend in private. When later on, we were poking around his backyard, I brought up the girl that I had seen and how she happened to look like the one in the pictures that he had hanging up on his wall. He met my sentence with a very confused look, but then relaxation. He made sure of exactly where and when I had seen the girl. I told him. It was enthusiasm that he didn't share. He was about to run to get his parents when he paused and thought better of it. He actually went and made sure his parents were distracted. They were both busy watching TV. He had me follow him. We began walking down the road when he pointed to a spot in the distance and asked me if that was where I had seen the girl. I nodded. How had he known? We turned off the road and began huffing through unmarked grassland until we came to a small, rundown shed. Almost a hut that had a strong box hidden underneath the floorboards. Right in front of me, my friend showed me a rifle with a scope. My pulse, I could feel, was quickening. I was confused and asked him what he was doing. He told me that his sister had gone missing one night nearly 2 years ago. She was 13 at the time. He was 12. They shared a bedroom, and she had woken up, thinking she had heard the voice of her dead grandfather coming from outside. She was ecstatic and rushed outside and was gone in an instant, vanished without a trace. From where we stood, I could see the girl coming towards us in the distance. I asked him if that was his sister, but he refused to answer me. He was almost in a trance. Before I could do or say anything, he trained the rifle and fired. I was horrified as the shot landed and the girl fell to the ground. But then there she was again. Then there were two of her. My friend shot at both of them when his sister stopped appearing. He looked at me with a very sad expression. He told me that his parents wouldn't tell him exactly what they were, except that they always occupied the appearance and voice of the last person they supposedly killed. And they liked to hang around in burial places. The plot of land where I first saw her was a cemetery that had been in my friend's family for generations. They don't move on the house often, but when they did, they always looked like his sister when she was 13. She would have been 15 at the time, if she were still alive. I wondered why he was being so open with me. Maybe he felt alien with all the weirdness of it, and just needed somebody to share his encounters with. It wasn't like I was going to be able to run to law enforcement and tell them that this family was murdering their daughter over and over again. Anyway, we stayed close friends for a while, but I feared that one day I would hear his voice calling me from a place I normally wouldn't see him. Well, that never happened, but the chance of it never left my mind This still stands out in my adult mind as one of the creepiest, eeriest, bizarrest things I've ever experienced, and just proves to me there are far more paranormal and supernatural things going on in this world than we can ever truly comprehend. I used to be a caseworker with CPS. This system ended up taking in custody of a child who was severely disturbed, both schizophrenic and prone to a wide variety of anxiety disorders. So to say that the child had his hands full would be putting it lightly. His parents had simply vanished, and somebody reported that they hadn't seen any adults around the house for a very long time. The boy didn't have much to say about it, but he eventually told workers that he had murdered his parents. He was only 9, and I didn't think this likely, considering the mental challenges he had to cope with. Police did investigate and found zero evidence of any foul play. There were a few signs of domestic struggling, but it was the kind that would have taken place between 2 adults, not adults and a child. I ended up growing attached to the boy, just because of how distressed he was, and how unusual the case was. We usually get children because the parents harm the kids, not the other way around. I wasn't privy to the more sensitive details, such as how he supposedly killed his parents, and it drove me crazy. I just wanted to help as much as I could, but it was out of my jurisdiction. On an ordinary day, a man and woman showed up at the same time to take the boy. They claimed to be his parents, and they even had all the evidence to prove it. They had his birth certificate, photos, everything that you'd expect parents to have. They said that the sitter they hired had dropped everything and ran out on them while they were abroad. That's when the phone call to CPS was made. All their information checked out perfectly. The only problem was the boy himself. He was terrified of his parents. He wanted nothing to do with them, and he nearly went into convulsions of self-preservation. He would scream that they weren't his real parents, and that it was a trick. They were visibly hurt by this, but also understanding, since their son was mentally ill to a severe degree. As much as he fought it, he had to leave. Something about it all didn't sit right with me, and in the mess of getting the boy out the door with his supposedly real parents, his case file had been left pulled up. The child's statement was that he had let something out of the basement that supposedly killed his parents and began looking and acting like them. He just managed to lock them back down in the basement during a supposed cat and mouse session. He had to endure the sound of his parents calling for him from the basement for days. Then the phone call was made, and our people came to get him. It sounded like the talk of a mentally ill person to me, but when I went to follow up on the well-being of the boy months later, both he and his parents had vanished entirely without a single trace. Nobody heard from them, saw them, and it's left a chill in my bones that has never left. To this day, many years later, I still have no idea what came from them. I got out of that because it was too emotionally strenuous. I now have a completely different career path, and I don't look back. This was one of the most bizarre and chilling cases I've ever worked with. Of course, being in CPS, you deal with a lot of heinous things, but this tops it. Back when I was only 16, I was walking home from school, in high school. I lived in a small rural town at the time, in Indiana. The kind of place where you can afford to feel safe. My only real trouble at the time was bullies, so I made it a point to hang back until nobody was really around before I would walk home. My attackers didn't have the patience to hang around forever. I had been doing this for weeks when I noticed a very large, very strangely marked owl that followed me home. I watched it from the corner of my eye. It would usually just hop from tree to tree, hanging just far enough behind me. If I turned to look at it, it would fly away, or sometimes freeze up. But as long as I didn't look at it directly, it would shadow me. I didn't really think anything of this until one week, when my parents would both be away, and I would be alone for 7 straight days. It sounded fine to me at the time, and it wasn't like I was going to get kidnapped. The first day that I would be alone, I was walking home, and my owl friend was behind me. I was somehow comforted by the animal's presence. It looked like any other barn owl, just that its size and markings were very, very wrong. I tried to find comfort, even in the weirdness. Just as I was heading back into my yard, though, I saw the owl land in one of the many trees. I at the time pretended not to see it. When it looked like it was going to head on in, the owl fluttered to the ground, even though I was looking at it from behind several trees. This is where it gets really, really weird. Now bear with me. I swear, it transformed into a human shape that was a coal gray. It appeared to move with incredible speed to the corner of our house, where it could peer at me from around it. I thought I was hallucinating and losing my mind. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my head. But there it was, still as a statue, staring, waiting for me to do something. I had worked up just enough courage to hurry through the front door and tightly lock it. Instantaneously, somebody on the other side had tried the knob and then knocked gently. I looked at the peephole, thinking somebody must have been waiting, playing a prank, but I couldn't see anything. As soon as I walked away from the door, there was more knocking, and it was much harder and urgent sounding this time. So, I quietly tiptoed to the front door and looked through the hole again. This time, I saw the face of our local mailman, which was ridiculous. Mail was delivered in the morning, around here, not 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I felt almost incapable of leaving the house out of fear for the rest of the week. But I pushed myself through it, and I only left when there were other people out on the sidewalk. I played the coming home game with the owl, or whatever it was. I ignored it every time that it appeared to turn into something and knock on my door. I made an attempt to tell my parents about it when they got back, but you can guess, being parents, what they thought. That I had an overactive imagination at 15 and 16, and that the shadows of the trees can create interesting illusions. The last thing has never come looking for me again, as far as I can tell. But I know what I saw for those 7 days. I have no idea what it was or what it wanted.